All right, I want to jump into our last talk before lunch. And for this interview, I'd like to bring on Evan, who is the co-founder of Mina Protocol and currently leads the Mina Foundation. We're going to talk about all things ZK, so please give Evan a big round of applause. All right. There's a lot of ZK this year around, and it's awesome because we're kind of seeing things become more and more practical. But you've been in this journey for a long time. We've known each other for 7+ years, and back then the word ZK was the same as Zcash. And my kind of first question to you is, walk me through kind of what was the very first version of Mina that you both developed, and what was that pitch? What was kind of the reaction back in the day, and how has that changed to what kind of we have now?
I mean, it was so different than now. There were we had a list of all the people that knew zero knowledge to a practical degree, and it was like 30 or so people. It was like my co-founder, and then the folks at Berkeley, and a few others. It was
the rest of the Starkware team, and then Zcash employees.
Exactly, it was like us, Zcash, Starkware, and that was kind of it. Like working on actual practical things. And so you talked about ZK to people, and they would be like, "Oh, that's like crazy that's even possible," which I still think it is often, but it was a very different world of the technology being very new. Yeah.
Is what you originally envisioned as Mina being the same version now? And if not, kind of what were some of the iterations from there?
I think, yes and no. I mean, the original version of Mina that we worked on was just this thing called, we called it, I think, Minibit. It was basically just kind of feature parity with Bitcoin, proof of work, et cetera, just compressing the whole history down into something very small. Even that was like really hard back in the day because the tooling was just not where it needed to be, and we had to work on a lot of tooling and to get it to be feasible. Just for example, like the public keys that were supported were on the order of like 800 bits. So they were like these huge public keys that you would have to use. There were lots of things like that, but no, I think that even from the beginning we were starting to think about smart contracts, ways to make them feasible. And they've come like a super long way. Like I think the original versions we were thinking of building more kind of like ZK CPUs that using the technology at the time, but it's become more practical. It actually builds more real computation systems. So in some ways, I think we're like farther because we can support so much more computation than before. In other ways, there's still a lot to get built out and to go. Yeah.
Nice. I remember the branding used to be the 20 kilobyte blockchain and kind of perpetuity, and now we're kind of seeing more apps, and I want to dig into that too. Maybe kind of just to set the stage, it would be helpful to understand how a proof works in Mina and sort of how your version of a proof might be different than what they may know from a different ZK chain. Just kind of let's just set that context.
Yeah, so at Mina, we use something called recursive zero-knowledge proofs, which lets you make proofs of other zero-knowledge proofs. And the thing that we used that for originally and still use it for today is for compressing the entire Mina chain into this very small, like around 20 kilobyte proof of the whole history. The idea being that if you want to fully verify a blockchain, you have to replay the history to know that it's valid. But if you have a zero knowledge proof, that can stand in for that whole downloading and checking everything, which means you can get it onto your phone, onto your browser, wherever, and get this really high level of security in this very efficient way. So that was what originally we were working on with Mina, was building that out, and that's what we originally launched. The thing that's new now is we have a development environment on top of that where you can basically build zero-knowledge smart contracts that let multiple users interact with them. So not only can you construct proofs locally on your device, but then you can send it out to Mina, and you can have these proofs interact with each other to make things like private voting or other kind of private applications.
So how do we access state and understand context if we're recursively proving and generating these proofs? So how do you kind of think about having a history of information still accessible, and what's kind of the way to think about these apps now?
Yeah, I think it requires like it's a different kind of model of like what the environment on the chain is. I think we think about it sometimes more like your computer hard drive, where you can access all the files that are currently being stored. But if you delete files, then they're kind of gone unless you have like you're tracking all that forever. So in Mina, like as a developer, you're intended to refer to the current state of the chain and to save things that you need to save in the current state of the chain, but not necessarily to look back. Necessarily. Now, you can do that. There's lots of block explorers and people that have been like, intrinsically, incentivized that they want to store this whole history of transactions so that people can see them. But it's not strictly necessary for the protocol and for applications. It's more of a...
They have the ability to still keep track of it, but they don't need it to re-verify.
And for example, like client devices do at least have the capacity to store their personal history of transactions, which they can then refer to. But they don't by default store the history of everybody else's transactions.
Nope, that makes sense. And maybe just to clarify, is this the same thing as a ZK app here in terms of kind of the framework that you're referencing, or are we kind of just talking about how the magic kind of happens in the background, but the general abstraction of ZK apps is more extensible?
Yeah, this is more like what's happening kind of in the background. Like ZK apps are built on top of this as kind of a model for talking about when accounts can change their state, but it's that's like more the back end. Yeah.
Nope, that makes a lot of sense. The other things I'm kind of curious about is once you kind of start on this path, you kind of also have to come up with a lot more abstractions, and you kind of had a fungible standard that you had to release and make that a bit more, I would say, just more familiar with the audience, because when you have the Mina fungible tokens. What was kind of the thinking behind that? How does that standard work? That's one. And then I want to kind of add on to the second question, which is, as you kind of have been thinking about building more apps on the chain, has that sort of inspired any changes that you feel like can be made on the layer one itself to support this?
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's a very different it's a very different programming model than the typical kind of EVM world. So, for example, this like fungible token standard is like, in some ways, our version of like ERC20, but in other ways, it's very different behind the scenes. So we're working on getting out standards like that. So as a developer, you can start using those things in a clean way. But yeah, like even since launching like the initial base layer, a lot of the development that's happened on top has been sort of on. You can think of them kind of as like native rollups or like little app chains or ZK rollups on top of Mina.
So each ZK app is that okay?
Each ZK app kind of is a ZK rollup, where you are bundling a lot of transactions, and then because it's recursing down, like posting the recursive proof back to Mina. So we kind of have like this native scaling thing sort of built in,
right?
That people are mostly using. But to do that, now we're realizing the L1 probably should change in some ways to better support that model of development.
Because my next question was going to be, can the apps talk to each other?
Exactly, yeah. So they can talk to each other, but it's not ideal right now. One thing that is nice is because these apps post like the Merkle root of their states to Mina. Once an app is posted its state, another app can refer to it very easily, and you can kind of.
This is pre-rollup or pre-recursion, or.
This is post-recursion.
Okay.
But it's kind of always happening, and it's like reasonably fast. So it's kind of like. Every few minutes, like these things are posting their commitments down to settle on the L1, and then you can refer to them back and forth between the app chains. So there's stuff that needs to get built out on that, both on the L2 side, but also on the L1 side. Like we want to have a standard for communicating between all these different app chains, because there's a few now different like L2s and app chains people are building on top of Mina. That would be nice if they could all communicate together, for example. And then there's other change. There's lots of changes this implies that we're thinking about. Models, for example, of like being able to reserve block space on the L1 for your app chain, so like you're able to consistently post to there.
Versus competing for like asset transfers.
Yeah, versus competing, and like if you have like an app chain that you really, want to be able to rely on the settlement of the L1 for the operation of it, it might be nice to be able to reserve some block space for like the next day or two or whatever.
Oh, that's a really cool concept. It's just like buying a reserve instance on AWS and just sort of think I have this spot. Let me may or may not use it. Huh.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's things like that. It's implying also like we are thinking about like, does this imply there should be like some kind of shared sequencing between all these things so that you can communicate faster than one block time between them? It also is implying like we probably want to get the latency really low, but the throughput is okay to actually delegate to like these app chains. So it's implying things there. So it's as people are building stuff, it's implying a lot of the stuff.
So how do you kind of think about where to sort of draw a line? And hey, this is a great change. We need to kind of make this be part of the next hard fork or just the next upgrade. And hey, this is nice to have, but we don't know how to think about prioritizing it because maybe it's a use case now, but may not be big in the future. How does the foundation and the protocol team think about this?
I mean, yeah, mostly right now it's just like what is blocking like the user experience improving, and a lot of the user experience stuff actually like just stuff on like the L2s or stuff that is part of the framework but not necessarily changes to the L1. So actually like there's a set of changes that make sense to do before those changes to the L1 even, but mostly it's like focused around like what creates like a really good UX for users, for developers, so that their applications are nice to build and use.
Nice. I guess on the similar thing, one thing I'm kind of curious about is you've kind of been on this path to get Mina out there and kind of do the original version of what you talked about, but in that same window, we kind of saw a lot more ZK experimentations, a lot more ZK chains. Were there any sort of lessons learned or kind of when you think about, hey, let me compare this to like Starkware or ZK Sync or some other recursive proof system we've seen, have there been kind of learnings that you feel like, oh, this would be actually helpful now if you were to think about a future change, or as you're now comparing and making more application world possible, what kind of can you feel like is good to steal from or learn from everybody else's experience?
Oh yeah, I mean there's tons of stuff that like retrospectively it would have been nice to have realized and known. I think the one of the main things is that I think there's really a few things. Like I think for one, like there's so many other people that are developing things on top of ZK now in terms of proof systems and proof of developments now. It's really a much larger community. I don't know what's happening with this. My phone is making sounds for no reason. Sorry. Very strange. Sorry. This is very bizarre. I don't know what's happening with my phone.
It adds to the value of the panel.
Yeah, it stays over there. No, I think for one, like, yeah, proof systems, there's been so many developments on them, like so much to learn. There's so much that, it's a much larger community now of things that are happening and being developed. So I think that's one area. Yeah, I think another one is just like, we've been in kind of this R&D mode for a very long time.
Because you had to do all these things because nothing existed, yes.
Yeah, we had to, but I think that it's nice to be in this kind of place of shipping now, and that's like a nice place to be at. But like, I do wonder sometimes there's ways we could get there earlier, sooner. But it's hard too because like a lot of this technology was
retrospective,
didn't fully exist, and they're still developing a lot of it too. Yeah.
Another thing I'm kind of curious about is, and obviously I understand the proof systems are a bit different, but did you ever kind of think about, especially after ZK-VMs came out or just ZK-EVMs became more and more possible, to sort of just support that world and allow more portability directly on the chain?
I think yes and no. So one thing that is very nice about the way the framework is set up on Mina right now is when you write your code, it directly turns into a circuit, which is very fast. Which is one of the things that makes it fast enough to run on phones, for example, or on browsers. It's actually like very nice to have this. It still looks very. It's in TypeScript. You're just writing code, but it turns into a circuit directly, and that makes it super fast. That said, like it's not like super priority right now, but there are people that are working on, like we have a Groth16 verifier on Mina now. There's people working on SP1. Right. And other Starks and other things now on Mina. Oh,
as in you get to write a circuit for those as precompiles?
Like verifiers.
Verifiers, okay.
That verify Starks and SP1 and et cetera on Mina. And this isn't like a primary focus right now, but there are people building out, talking about building out at least, some people starting to, like L2s on Mina that will have kind of different environments, like ZK-EVMs and Starks and et cetera. Where we want them still all to be able to talk to each other, but all these different ones settling down to the L1. Oh,
that's super cool.
Yeah.
Where is that in terms of development? Is that like an idea to being prototyped, or you've seen this and it could be coming out soon?
I think it's pretty early.
Okay.
Like there are like some community members that like are like they're quite like
Found that it's possible. Now we just got to make it.
some of them are quite quick at some of it, but I think they're just kind of starting it. And I suspect actually like there's we use step one, which is like taking these other proof systems and verifying them on Mina. And there's step two about like actually building out L2s on Mina that actually are able to create a good development environment for those other systems and then actually have some communication between them.
And this is not the same as creating a better standard library support. This is on the communication consensus side.
Exactly, yeah. This would be like you have like some ZK-VM, ZK app chain that is posting things down to the L1, and there is some library in that app chain and in the other app chain so they can communicate with each other.
That's super cool.
Yeah, it's cool. I think it's like pretty future, but it's people are starting to work on it.
So it's going to get more and more crazier in the world of ZK. Wow. Yeah. Now I'm just like on my own world, like, oh, I got to check this out now. Okay. Well, I do want to kind of do some kind of final concluding questions here. Where is the foundation's time going, and kind of what are you focused on, and kind of what are your priorities now as a protocol?
Yeah, I think it's a few things. I mean, I think for one, like we've been in like I kind of mentioning this like research and development mode, and we have launched the smart contract stuff. So a lot of it is just kind of getting the stuff out there now, and like I think we have like a growing developer community. It like feels like it's like hitting some like good like traction and thresholds. But now it's like about what do we need else to build out on like the UX and like the application side to really to get all the building blocks ready. Like we mentioned like this token standard. Mentioning like these like app chains. We want to have like DEXs launched on Mina, working on helping folks do that. There's a lot of community projects getting built that we want to help get to actually launching. And then there's a lot of work beyond that, like how can we actually help these projects get users and like and actually be successful? Like what can we do as the foundation to support them? Because there's a lot of these things that are like super new. And
both of you are learning what to do next.
Exactly, yeah, and it's new use cases and stuff as well.
Amazing. Well, I guess my last question is, what can people do to get involved? And if there's a wish list of things that you are looking for, this would be the time to ask everybody and see what's important for how people can get involved in this space.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you've been curious about ZK, like it's definitely worth like checking out. I mean, not just our stuff, but a lot of the other stuff too. Like, and seeing what it's like to build with. I think it's like doable now in a lot of ways, and you can get access to new functionality. So I think it's worth checking out. We have like a grant program where we just like support people that are building things. It's called like Navigators, and just monthly grants as long as you're building cool things on Mina. The other thing I'd mention is like we're starting to work a lot on governance, like at the L1 level. Like I think it's something that I wish more folks were doing in some ways, like thinking about how like we as communities can directly govern like these projects. And so if you're interested in that too, we have like a lot of programs we're like kind of in beta or testing right now for kind of direct like governance of the protocol. So if you're interested in that, you can check that out also. And that's all in our Discord. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, Evan, I want to thank you for this amazing conversation. And I'm personally excited to look more up on this L2 world. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, please give Evan a big round of applause, everybody.